When my husband opened the door and saw my father with his tool in my mouth. Welcome to the channel Infidelity Stories. My name is Lisa, and today I will share a very delicate story. I'm going to talk about the day my father got me pregnant. This is a truth I've carried alone until now because my husband believes that our child is his and has never doubted it. This is something I never imagined would happen to me. It was a devastating experience that completely changed my life, and each day since has been filled with tension. Even today, the emotions of that moment linger with me, despite everything. My husband continues to believe that the child we've raised together is his, and I've lived with this secret in my heart. Sharing this story isn't something just any woman could do, but I hope that by doing so, I can feel a bit relieved and perhaps help others who have gone through something similar, when the pandemic hit the US in 2019. My life was already in a whirlwind of chaos. I had just returned to the country after spending 2 years studying in Spain, where I had an incredible experience but one that distanced me from my roots. Coming back to the US was harder than I expected. I had been married to John for a year and a half. We met during my exchange program and tried to start from scratch, adjusting to life back here, but reality hit hard. The job I got barely covered basic expenses, and when the pandemic arrived, things got even worse, every day was a struggle to pay the rent, utilities, and even put food on the table. The fear of losing everything I had built was constant. Faced with this, I realized I had to make a tough choice. I decided to separate from John for a while and asked him to stay with his parents. I, on the other hand, considered living with my mom or dad. The idea of going back to my mom's house didn't appeal to me at all. I never got along with my stepfather, and living with him was always difficult. The last thing I wanted was to be stuck in an uncomfortable situation in such a complicated time. But amidst all this stress, something unexpected happened. My dad, with whom I had a somewhat distant relationship, reached out to me. He had heard about my situation and, concerned, made me an offer. He asked if I'd like to stay with him in his apartment. This proposal felt like a light at the end of the tunnel. I didn't have to choose between two bad options anymore, but instead, I could accept an offer from someone who genuinely seemed to want to help me through this difficult time, I accepted his offer with a sense of relief, feeling that maybe this was the best solution for the chaos my life had become. Living with my dad, things weren't perfect, but they were certainly better than I imagined. Slowly, I began to rebuild myself, and though this phase was tough, it taught me a lot about how help sometimes comes from unexpected places. My dad was comfortably retired after working his whole life in the oil industry, so money was never an issue for him. With that sense of security, I decided to quit my job and fully focus on the lockdown. Even though he was relatively young at 54, my dad had high blood pressure, putting him in a high-risk group for the pandemic. We both knew we had to take isolation seriously, so we agreed that I would handle all outside interactions, and even then, only for essentials, we always had a very open and honest relationship, which made living together during lockdown smooth and enjoyable. We shared household chores and took turns cooking, which lightened the mood and made the days feel less heavy. We spent a lot of time together watching movies and TV shows, creating relaxing moments and strengthening our bond even more, as the weeks passed, our intimacy naturally grew. Since we couldn't go out to get haircuts, I started cutting his hair, and he began dyeing mine. These small routines created a mutual sense of care, which became more and more natural. Living together daily brought new dynamics, like seeing each other coming out of the shower in just a towel or getting dressed, situations that would have been awkward before but now felt completely normal. Even using the bathroom with the door open became something common between us, this closeness brought a new level of trust and comfort that, in a way, redefined what it meant to live together. Whenever I wore my little shorts, I'd notice his eyes following me with every step. At first, I tried to ignore it, but it was impossible not to notice. I had never been the beauty of the neighborhood, but I also never thought of myself as plain or invisible. My vibrant red hair stood out against my fair skin, creating a contrast that modestly attracted attention, especially from an older man stuck indoors with few distractions, as wrong as I knew it was, I couldn't help but feel a spark from the attention he was giving me. I remember one of those ordinary days when I woke up to find my dad sitting at the edge of my bed, holding a tray with a fancy breakfast, something he rarely did. In that moment, I realized it wasn't just any day. It was my 32nd birthday, and he had gone out of his way to make the morning special, "Sweetheart, how about we celebrate your birthday like we used to?" he suggested with a smile, pulling me into a warm hug and wishing me a happy birthday. His proposal caught me off guard, and while the idea of reviving an old tradition filled me with nostalgia, it also made me feel strangely uneasy. There was sweetness in the gesture, but also something I couldn't quite define, a mix of conflicting emotions swirling inside me. That morning brought back memories of when I was younger. Our special father-daughter days were always eagerly awaited. He would start by bringing me breakfast in bed, making me feel truly special. Then he'd cook my favorite meal: rice, beans, fried steak, and French fries. Simple, but always my favorite. After lunch, we'd spend the day playing games, often ending with a trip to the movies where I'd have a blast with popcorn in hand. Now, years later, we had the chance to relive one of these special days. We started playing board games, laughing like we used to. He even offered to paint my nails, remembering an activity we did when I was little. It was a gesture full of love, reminding me how much those moments still meant to us both. Later that night, after we'd spent a day full of nostalgia, I slipped into something comfortable and went to his room. Opening the door, I expected to see him asleep as usual, but instead, I was met with a scene I wasn't quite ready for. There he was, watching something explicit on his phone, his body visibly responding. The air became thick with tension, and he quickly tried to hide what was happening. Keeping calm, I acted like I hadn't noticed anything. After all, I'd seen this before. My husband John would do the same, and I never made a fuss about it. Why should I? Smiling, I decided to ease the situation with a joke. "I think we forgot an important part of the celebration." He looked at me, curious but clearly trying to keep control of the situation, hiding what I had already seen beneath the covers. "Well, what part of the celebration did I forget, sweetheart?" I walked closer, feeling the tension in the air soften. We exchanged a look that spoke more than words. With a smile on my face, I knew the night had only just begun. As I approached the bed, the tension in the air seemed to fade slightly, but there was still an undercurrent of adrenaline between us. My smile signaled that I wasn't there to judge, but rather to break the ice, to turn the moment into something lighter, perhaps even more intimate, but it wasn't time for that yet. He was watching me closely, trying to understand my intentions, uncertain of where this was going. "You always let me sleep in your bed on my birthday, Dad, remember?" I said, bringing up a sweet memory from the past. Those nights had been special to me when I was younger, and I knew he would remember them fondly as well. He looked at me for a moment, clearly reflecting on what I had said, as if he was reorganizing his memories, trying to understand what I meant. He stayed silent for a few seconds, during which it seemed like he was processing my words. Perhaps he thought I was hinting at something more, something less innocent. I was certain that his mind, influenced by the explicit content he had been watching, was considering things beyond what I had actually said. I noticed the significant bulge he was trying to hide under the blanket. I may have been his daughter, but at that moment, what he saw was an adult woman teasing him. Despite realizing I had noticed his arousal, he chose to stay quiet, as if not acknowledging it would somehow keep the situation under control, maintaining the illusion that nothing unusual was happening. He then set his phone aside, moving away from the device that had created the initial tension between us. With a simple gesture, he lifted the corner of the blanket, signaling for me to join him in bed. He tapped the pillow beside him lightly, as if inviting me to lie next to him, just like in the old days. No words were necessary. He left the decision in my hands, allowing me to choose the next step. I slowly climbed into bed, feeling a sense of control over the situation. You're probably curious about what happened next, right? Well, we're almost there. Don't forget to leave your like and comment below. Without hesitation, I lay down beside him and snuggled into his arms. The warmth and comfort were undeniable, but there was also a new layer of emotions mixed in, making the moment both familiar and different. We started talking, sharing stories, memories, and laughter, just like we used to. Time flew by without us noticing until eventually, the exhaustion caught up with us, and we fell asleep together, side by side, as if nothing had changed between us over the years. The next morning, I noticed a subtle shift in my dad's behavior. He was more affectionate than usual, as if he wanted to please me even more, but at the same time, I sensed a slight discomfort, as though he was confused by his own feelings. It was as if he was trying to balance two things at once, the natural fatherly love he had always felt, and a new sense of unease he couldn't quite explain. As for me, I was lost in my own thoughts about what our relationship meant now. The idea that we were alone, isolated from the world, made my mind wander to possibilities that had once seemed impossible. The isolation, the lack of contact with others, and the time we spent together had created an environment where boundaries felt more flexible, less clear. I found myself wondering what it would be like if our relationship evolved into something more intimate, something that, in any other context, would be completely inappropriate. But here, in isolation, who would know? Who could judge? Deep down, I sensed that he was going through his own turmoil of emotions. There were moments when I'd catch him looking at me differently, and I knew I had to be careful. I needed to act cautiously because one wrong move could destroy everything we had built, and I didn't want to lose the special connection we had formed, even if it was transforming into something new and unknown. That night, after my birthday, when my dad went to his room, I followed him again, just like the night before. I put on a comfortable nightgown and, without saying a word, climbed into bed beside him, taking up the empty space. He seemed surprised but also amused, and with a smile, he asked, "Is it your birthday again already?" I smiled back and responded, "There's no reason for us to sleep in separate beds, right? We can enjoy the time together, talk, watch a show, and even save on bed linen. Don't you think that's a better idea?" He looked at me for a moment as if he were considering my words, and then, with a slight nod, he said, "I don't disagree at all," and switched off the bedside lamp. A few months after we had entered lockdown together, my father and I had grown closer than ever, and we had started sleeping in the same bed. But even then, I knew there was still a little way to go before my plan would come to fruition. Despite sensing that he felt desire for me, I was afraid to make a big move and scare him. After all, it was still a taboo for him. The next night, after telling him that I intended to sleep with him regularly, I went to my room, grabbed all of my clothes, and moved them into his closet. He watched with a little smile. From that point on, we didn't watch movies on the couch anymore, only in our bed, wearing as little clothing as possible, as if it was perfectly natural. When it came time to sleep, I always snuggled as close as I could. Then one night, something happened. I woke up in the middle of the night, feeling the pressure of his hardened body against me. I turned to kiss him, but before I could, I realized that he wasn't awake. That's when I decided to kiss him anyway. His body was as hard as a rock, and even though he wasn't showing any signs of waking, I stopped shortly after and returned to spooning him as I drifted back to sleep. The next day, we didn't mention it. That evening, as I was taking a shower, the bathroom door opened, and Dad walked in, saying, "Is there room for one more?" He stepped into the shower, completely naked. "I've been thinking about what happened last night, Lisa. Did I cross the line while we were sleeping?" That's when I realized he hadn't been sleeping at all. He had done it all intentionally. But since it was what I had wanted, I quickly responded, "No, Dad, you didn't cross any line. Besides, there are no lines, right? It's just the two of us in the world. Remember? This is our world." He pressed me against the wall, kissing me passionately. I grabbed the soap and began to wash his exposed body, focusing on his arousal. After we finished in the shower, we dried off and went to bed, where we stayed up late into the night, kissing and engaging in intimate moments, talking and exchanging caresses, until we fell asleep in each other's arms. A few days later, I returned to John, my husband. By that time, he was in a much better financial situation, and he could support us comfortably, which was a huge relief for me. This improvement in our life brought a sense of stability, but at the same time, I started to notice signs that I might be pregnant. I was feeling nauseous, lightheaded, and experiencing a strange sensation I had never felt before. I shared this with John, and without hesitation, he believed the pregnancy was a result of our relationship. After all, on the first day I came back, we had been intimate multiple times. He was convinced that was the moment everything happened. What John didn't know, and what I had kept to myself all this time, was that these symptoms had started several days before we were together. The child I was carrying wasn't his, it was my father's. This is a secret I've carried alone. Only one of my closest friends knows the truth, and to this day, I've never had the courage to share it with anyone else. Holding this inside was a difficult decision, but one I felt necessary. After all, how could I possibly tell anyone? Everyone would judge me without a second thought. I feel like this is the first time I've truly put these words out into the world, and there's a strange sense of relief in saying it. A few months later, my beautiful daughter, Emma, was born. She brought an immense light into my life, something I had never felt before. She was a gift, but at the same time, she carried with her a silent burden because, biologically, she was not only my daughter but also my half-sister. This complex connection has never affected the love I have for her. Emma is the most precious thing in my world, and everything I do, every choice I make, is to ensure her well-being and happiness. Innocent as she is, Emma has no idea about any of this. To her, I am simply her mother, and John is her father. We live a normal life, a happy family in everyone's eyes, and I do everything I can to maintain that harmony, to protect her from any potential suffering. Emma, with her charming smile and sweet nature, brightens each of my days. Sometimes I catch myself thinking about how fate has been both cruel and kind, cruel in how things unfolded, yet generous in giving me such a wonderful daughter. Now, my whole life revolves around Emma. My greatest mission is to ensure she has a happy childhood, full of love and joy. I go to great lengths to protect her future, so she never discovers the dark secret behind her origin. To the world, we are just a regular family, and I would do anything to keep it that way, even if it means carrying this weight inside me forever. Living with this secret is tough, but the love I feel for Emma is greater than anything else. She is the center of my life, and there is nothing I wouldn't do to see her happy and smiling. Her happiness is what keeps me going, despite everything. John, who is a devoted and loving father to her, has never suspected that he isn't her biological father. He never questioned the timing or dates, and frankly, it doesn't matter. John will always be her father, the father I chose for her. The discovery of my pregnancy broke something inside me, perhaps forever, like a switch that turned off my sense of reason. But I continue to get along with my father, and we have even formed a new bond. I know many of you will judge me, but please leave your comments below. What do you think? What should I do? If you enjoyed this story of betrayal, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Before you leave, remember to subscribe.